Right now, as you sit here, there are two conversations happening in your mind. One whispers doubt, limitation, and fear. The other speaks of possibility, strength, and triumph. Every single moment of your life, you choose which gets to be the loudest. Which conversation do you feed with your attention? Which inner dialogue shapes your reality? Most people never realize they have this choice. They let their minds run wild, accepting whatever thoughts show up as truth. But here's what I need you to understand. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your thinking, not your circumstances, not your past, not what others have done to you. The conversations you have with yourself create the world you live in. Your thoughts are not random visitors in your mind. They are the seeds you plant in the garden of your consciousness. Every thought you think, every word you speak to yourself, every internal conversation you entertain becomes the blueprint for your external reality. This is not wishful thinking or positive psychology. This is the fundamental law of creation operating in your life right now. The uncomfortable truth that most people refuse to accept is this: you are 100% responsible for your responses to everything that happens in your life. Not responsible for what happens to you, but absolutely responsible for how you respond. Your response determines your results. Your internal dialogue determines your response. Therefore, your internal dialogue determines your results. Most people live as victims of their circumstance. They point to their past, their environment, their limitations, their failures, and they say, "This is why I can't succeed." But successful people understand something different. They know that circumstances are neutral. Circumstances don't have power over you unless you give them power through your thinking. You cannot plant weeds in your mind and expect to harvest success. You cannot fill your inner conversations with complaint, excuse, and limitation and expect to create a life of abundance and achievement. The universe is precise. It gives you exactly what you focus on, exactly what you think about, exactly what you speak to yourself about most often. Your outer world is a perfect reflection of your inner world. If you want to change your results, you must change your thinking. If you want to change your thinking, you must change the conversations you have with yourself. This is where all transformation begins. 3 years ago, I met a man named Rob. He was 45 years old, 60 pounds overweight, working a job he hated, in a marriage that was falling apart and drowning in debt. By every external measure, his life was a disaster. But Robert discovered something that changed everything. He discovered that he had been his own worst enemy through the words he spoke to himself every single day. Robert told me that his internal dialogue was a constant stream of self-criticism, doubt, and defeat. "I'm too old to change," he would tell himself. "I'm not smart enough to succeed. I always mess things up. Nothing ever works out for me. I'm just not the type of person who gets ahead in life." These weren't just thoughts passing through his mind. These were the core beliefs that governed his actions and determined his results. Then, one morning, Robert made a decision that transformed his entire existence. He decided to take complete responsibility for the end his had. He realized that nobody else was creating his internal dialogue. Nobody else was choosing his thoughts. He was the author of his own mental conversations, and if he created them, he could change them. Robert began to monitor his self-talk like a scientist studying data. Every time he caught himself thinking or speaking words of limitation, he would stop and ask himself, "Is this thought serving me? Is this conversation moving me toward my goals or away from them?" When the answer was no, he would deliberately choose a different thought, a different conversation, a different way of speaking to himself. Instead of "I'm too old to change," Robert began saying, "I have the wisdom and experience to make better choices now." Instead of "I'm not smart enough," he started telling himself, "I learn quickly and apply what I learn." Instead of "Nothing ever works out for me," he chose, "I create solutions and opportunities everywhere I go." The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened steadily. Within 6 months, Robert had lost 40 pounds. Not through some extreme diet, but because he stopped telling himself he was undisciplined and started affirming his commitment to health. He began speaking to himself like someone who valued his body and made choices that honored that value. His marriage began to improve because he stopped telling himself he was unlovable and started conversations with himself about being a caring, attentive partner. His career shifted because he stopped reinforcing his identity as someone who never got ahead, and began seeing himself as someone who created value and found opportunity. By the end of that year, Robert had been promoted twice, had saved his marriage, had gotten his health back, and was on track to pay off his debts. The external circumstances of his life had completely changed, but the only thing that actually changed was the way he talked to himself. This is the foundation of all personal growth. It's an inside job. Your external circumstances are merely effects. Your internal conversations are the cause. Most people try to change their lives by changing their circumstances, but that's like trying to change your reflection by adjusting the mirror. You must change what's being reflected. Success doesn't come from external circumstances. It comes from internal conversation. The person who talks to themselves like a winner will eventually win. The person who talks to themselves like a victim will remain trapped. The person who speaks to themselves with encouragement, possibility, and determination will create a life that matches that internal dialogue. Think of your mind like a garden. Every thought you think is a seed. Every word you speak to yourself is water and sunlight for that seed. If you plant seeds of doubt, fear, and limitation, and you water them with negative self-talk, you will harvest a life of struggle and disappointment. But if you plant seeds of possibility, faith, and determination, and you nourish them with encouraging internal dialogue, you will harvest success and fulfillment. The successful person understands that they are the gardener of their own consciousness. They don't let weeds grow wild in their mental garden. They carefully tend to their thoughts, deliberately choosing what to plant and what to remove. They understand that their harvest depends entirely on what they choose to cultivate. Building a successful life is like constructing a building. You cannot build a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. You cannot create lasting success on a foundation of negative self-talk. Every great achievement requires a solid foundation of empowering internal dialogue. Every breakthrough begins with a breakthrough in thinking. The thoughts you think and the words you speak to yourself literally rewire your brain. Neuroscientists have proven that your brain creates new neural pathways based on repeated thoughts and mental patterns. When you consistently speak to yourself with encouragement and possibility, you create neural pathways that make optimism and confidence your default mental state. Your brain has something called the reticular activating system, which filters the millions of pieces of information competing for your attention every moment. This system shows you what it thinks is important based on what you focus on most. If you constantly tell yourself about problems, limitations, and obstacles, your brain will filter reality to show you more problems, limitations, and obstacles. But if you train your mind to focus on opportunities, solutions, and possibilities, your brain will begin to highlight those things in your environment. This is why two people can experience the exact same situation and see completely different reality. One person's internal dialogue creates a filter that shows them what's wrong, what's missing, and what's impossible. The other person's internal dialogue creates a filter that shows them what's possible, what's available, and what's within reach. Your self-talk directly impacts your physiology. When you speak to yourself with criticism and defeat, your body produces stress hormones that cloud your thinking and weaken your immune system. When you speak to yourself with encouragement and confidence, your body produces chemicals that enhance your mental clarity and boost your energy. Your internal dialogue literally changes your body chemistry. The conversations you have with yourself also become self-fulfilling prophecies. If you tell yourself you're not capable of achieving something, you'll unconsciously sabotage your efforts to prove yourself right. If you tell yourself you're destined for greatness, you'll unconsciously look for ways to make that true. Your subconscious mind always works to make your dominant thoughts reality. This is why it's crucial to understand that you can consciously choose and direct your internal dialogue. You are not a victim of your thoughts. You are the creator of your thoughts. You can decide what conversations to have with yourself. You can choose which in your head gets to be the loudest. Now I want you to be completely honest with yourself. What has your internal dialogue been telling you about your potential? What conversations have you been having with yourself about your abilities, your worth, your future? Has that inner been your greatest supporter or your harshest critic? If you're like most people, you've been unconsciously sabotaging yourself through the words you speak internally. You've been reinforcing limitations rather than possibilities. You've been strengthening doubt rather than faith. You've been programming yourself for mediocrity rather than excellence. But here's the truth that can change everything. You have the power to change that conversation right now. You have the ability to choose different thoughts, speak different words to yourself, and create different internal dialogue. And when you change your internal dialogue, you change your entire life. The key is understanding that your thoughts and self-talk follow predictable patterns. Most people are unconscious of these patterns, so they remain trapped by them. But once you become aware of your mental patterns, you gain the power to change them. And once you change your patterns of thinking, you change your patterns of result. Once you recognize that your thoughts follow patterns, you begin to see that life itself operates according to predictable patterns. These patterns are not random. They are not coincidence. They are the natural rhythms of existence. And understanding them gives you tremendous power to shape your destiny. Every life follows the same basic rhythm as the seasons. There are times of planting, times of growth, times of harvest, and times of rest. Most people fight against these natural cycles instead of working with them. They expect constant growth, immediate results, and perpetual harvest. When they hit a winter season in their lives, they panic and assume something is wrong. But successful people understand these patterns. They know that after every winter comes spring. They know that challenges are not permanent conditions, but temporary seasons that serve a purpose. They know that difficulties often prepare the soil for their greatest breakthroughs. Right now, which season are you in? Are you in a planting season where you need to be sowing seeds of new habits, new skills, new relationships? Are you in a growth season where you need to be patient and consistent while your efforts take root? Are you in a harvest season where you need to be capitalizing on opportunities and collecting the rewards of your previous efforts? Or are you in a winter season where you need to be resting, reflecting, and preparing for the next cycle of growth? The person who recognizes their season and responds appropriately will always outperform the person who fights against the natural flow of their circumstances. When you're in a planting season, you don't demand immediate harvest. When you're in a winter season, you don't despair about the lack of visible growth. You understand that everything has its time, and you position yourself accordingly. These seasonal patterns repeat in every area of your life. Your career goes through seasons. Your relationships go through seasons. Your health goes through seasons. Your financial situation goes through seasons. When you understand this, you stop taking temporary setbacks personally and start seeing them as natural parts of a larger pattern. The key is learning to read these patterns in your own life. Most people are so focused on their immediate circumstances that they miss the bigger picture. They don't see that their current challenge is actually preparing them for their next opportunity. They don't recognize that their current struggle is developing the strength they'll need for their next level of success. Your results are showing you exactly what you've been thinking. If you want to change your results, you must first recognize the patterns in your thinking that created them. This requires brutal honesty with yourself. You must be willing to look at your mental habits without making excuses or blaming others. When you start tracking your thoughts and internal conversations, you'll notice that they follow predictable script. When you face a challenge, you probably respond with the same type of thinking every time. When you encounter an opportunity, you likely have the same internal dialogue. When you experience success, you probably have the same mental reaction. These patterns were created through repetition, and they can be changed through repetition. But first, you must become aware of them. Most people are unconscious of their mental patterns, so they remain trapped by them. Awareness is the first step to freedom. The most destructive patterns are those that lead to self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is not obvious. It doesn't announce itself. It masquerades as being realistic, practical, or protective. It shows up as procrastination when you're on the verge of a breakthrough. It appears as perfectionism when you need to take action. It manifests as fear when you need to be courageous. Self-sabotage happens when your internal dialogue contradicts your stated goals. You say you want success, but you talk to yourself about all the reasons why you can't achieve it. You claim you want to change, but you reinforce your old identity through your self-talk. You declare you're ready for the next level, but you convince yourself that you're not qualified, not ready, not good enough. The mentality of mediocrity has specific characteristics. It focuses on problems instead of solutions. It emphasizes what's wrong instead of what's possible. It highlights obstacles instead of opportunities. It reinforces limitations instead of potential. It creates excuses instead of results. People with a mediocre mentality talk to themselves about what they can't do, what they don't have, what they're not good at. They focus on their weaknesses instead of their strengths. They dwell on their failures instead of their success. They rehearse their limitations instead of their possibilities. The mentality of success is completely different. It focuses on solutions instead of problems. It emphasizes opportunities instead of obstacles. It highlights potential instead of limitations. It creates results instead of excuses. It builds confidence instead of doubt. Successful people talk to themselves about what they can do, what they have to work with, what they're capable of achieving. They focus on their strengths and how to maximize them. They learn from their failures but don't dwell on them. They rehearse their victories and visualize their future success. The difference between these two mentalities is not talent, luck, or circumstances. The difference is the internal dialogue that each person chooses to maintain. The successful person deliberately chooses empowering self-talk. The mediocre person unconsciously accepts whatever thoughts happen to show up. Procrastination is one of the most common forms of self-sabotage, and it always begins with your internal dialogue. When you need to take action, your mind starts a conversation about why you should wait. I'm not ready yet. I need more information. The timing isn't right. I should prepare more first. These thoughts seem reasonable, but they're actually sabotage disguised as wisdom. The procrastinator's internal dialogue is always focused on what could go wrong instead of what could go right. They rehearse failure scenarios instead of success scenarios. They imagine criticism instead of praise. They anticipate rejection instead of acceptance. This type of thinking creates paralysis, not preparation. Excuse making is another form of self-sabotage that starts with your self-talk. When you face a challenge or setback, your mind immediately begins generating reasons why it's not your fault. I didn't have enough time. I didn't have the right resources. Other people had advantages I didn't have. The situation was unfair. These conversations protect your ego, but destroy your power. The excuse maker's internal dialogue is always focused on external factors instead of internal control. They talk to themselves about what others should do instead of what they can do. They emphasize what's missing instead of what's available. They highlight what's wrong with the situation instead of what they can do to improve it. Blame is perhaps the most destructive form of self-sabotage because it makes you a victim of your circumstances. When you blame others for your results, you give away your power to change those results. Your internal dialogue becomes focused on what others have done to you instead of what you can do for yourself. The blamer's self-talk is always about other people's failures, other people's faults, other people's shortcomings. They rehearse conversations about how they've been wronged instead of how they can move forward. They focus on who's responsible for their problems instead of who's responsible for their solutions. But there's a way to break these destructive patterns. There's a framework that can eliminate self-sabotage from your life permanently. It's simple but requires discipline. It requires you to become the guardian of your own mind. The framework has 3 steps: catch, challenge, and change. First, you must catch yourself in the act of negative self-talk. This requires vigilance and awareness. You must become sensitive to the conversations happening in your mind. The moment you notice yourself thinking or speaking words of limitation, doubt, or defeat, you must stop and recognize what's happening. Second, you must challenge these thoughts. You must ask yourself, is this thought serving me? Is this conversation moving me toward my goals or away from them? Is this internal dialogue empowering me or weakening me? Most negative self-talk cannot survive honest questioning. When you challenge your limiting thoughts, you often realize they have no real foundation. Third, you must change the conversation. You must deliberately choose a different thought, a different internal dialogue, a different way of speaking to yourself. This isn't about positive thinking. This is about accurate thinking. This is about choosing thoughts that serve your goals instead of sabotage them. Instead of "I can't do this," you say, "I'm learning how to do this." Instead of "this is too hard," you say, "this is developing my strength." Instead of "I'm not good enough," you say, "I'm improving every day." Instead of "this won't work," you say, "I'll find a way to make this work." The key is to create pattern interrupts. Every time you catch yourself in negative self-talk, you must interrupt that pattern immediately. The longer you allow negative thoughts to run in your mind, the stronger they become. But when you interrupt them quickly and replace them with empowering thoughts, you begin to create new neural pathways. This process requires repetition. You cannot change decades of negative thinking with a few positive thoughts. You must consistently replace limiting self-talk with empowering self-talk until the new pattern becomes automatic. It's like retraining a muscle. At first, it feels awkward and requires conscious effort, but with practice, it becomes natural and effortless. The goal is not to eliminate all negative thoughts. The goal is to eliminate the negative thoughts that don't serve you. There are times when critical thinking is necessary. There are situations where you need to identify problems and obstacles, but this should be done strategically, not habitually. When you face challenges, your internal dialogue should focus on solutions, not problems. Instead of talking to yourself about how difficult the situation is, you should be talking about how you can handle it. Instead of rehearsing everything that could go wrong, you should be planning everything that could go right. Challenges are not obstacles to your success. They are opportunities to demonstrate your strength. They are tests that prepare you for greater responsibility. They are teachers that develop your character and capabilities. When you understand this, your internal dialogue about challenges completely changes. You wake up, and before your feet even touch the ground, a decision is made, consciously or not, about the kind of day you're going to have. Not based on mood, not based on circumstances, but based on what you've trained yourself to do when nobody's watching. This is where extraordinary lives begin, not in the spotlight, but in the quiet, often unseen disciplines repeated every single day. It's not about talent. It's not about luck. It's about choosing to do the hard things when it would be easier to stay comfortable. Most people are waiting to feel motivated before they act. But the highest achievers in the world, they've built a system where discipline drives action, not emotion. They don't need to feel inspired. They've trained themselves to show up regardless. There's something magnetic about someone who's committed to excellence, even when it's inconvenient. While others procrastinate, they act. While others complain, they adapt. They have rituals, non-negotiables, habits that no one else sees, but those small patterns become the scaffolding of greatness. The truth is, success isn't one big moment. It's thousands of tiny decisions stacked on top of each other, until the compound effect becomes undeniable. Ask yourself this: what do you consistently do that nobody claps for? That's the real measure. Because when it's no longer about praise, when it's no longer about being noticed, you begin to do the things that forge character. And character builds legacies. It starts with the alarm clock. Do you hit snooze, or do you get up even when you don't feel like it? That single choice echoes into every other area of your life. The person who trains themselves to rise when it's hardest to do so becomes the person who others eventually look up to. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being faithful to the process, to your standards, to the vision you carry even when it feels far away. Daily disciplines are not glamorous. They're often repetitive. They'll test your patience, but they will also reveal your grit. You don't need to be extreme. You need to be consistent. Because the person who does the basics with precision over and over again outpaces the one who occasionally shows brilliance. Consistency beats intensity every time. High achievers build systems that make the decision for them. They don't leave their progress up to chance. They schedule their priorities. They anchor their mornings. They protect their mindset like it's gold. While most people are reactive, responding to whatever the world throws at them, those who live on purpose build their day with intention, hour by hour, moment by moment. Every success story has a quiet foundation, a period where the person was grinding with no applause, no recognition, no obvious reward. But that's where greatness is shaped. In the ordinary, in the unnoticed, in the daily disciplines no one else wanted to stick with. They understood one truth: you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And those systems are crafted in your routines. The power is not in what you do once. It's in what you do repeatedly. That's why discipline isn't punishment, it's freedom. When you discipline your mind, your body, your environment, you create a space where excellence becomes automatic, not effortless, but automatic, because you've trained yourself to respond, not react, to move forward, not hesitate, to create momentum instead of waiting for it. If you can control your morning, you control your momentum. And if you control your momentum, you shape your direction. You begin to walk into rooms differently. You think clearer, act faster, and build confidence, not from results, but from keeping promises to yourself. That's what self-respect is built on. Doing what you said you would do, long after the mood you made the commitment in has passed. The moment you let excuses slip in, your standards start to slip with them. That's why top performers guard their environment, their time, their inputs. They don't allow distractions to become dominant. They cut off what drains them. They surround themselves with what fuels their progress. Not because they're better, but because they understand the cost of being careless. Every day, every hour has a weight, and they carry it with intention. There are no shortcuts worth taking. Every shortcut steals the very thing you're trying to build. Resilience, strength, confidence. Every skipped rep, every missed commitment tells your subconscious that your goals don't matter. But when you show up, even when it's hard, even when no one is watching, you tell your mind, this is who I am, and that identity becomes unshakable. Most people are searching for hacks, but mastery comes from repetition, from falling in love with the process, even when it feels boring, because within that boredom is where breakthroughs live. Discipline isn't loud, it's quiet. It's doing the work when you're tired, saying no to things that weaken your momentum, choosing the hard path because you know where it leads. And here's what most people miss. Discipline creates joy, not the shallow kind that fades after a like or a quick win, but the kind that builds from progress, from integrity, from knowing you're moving in alignment with your highest self. That joy doesn't need validation. It radiates from within. Because when you keep showing up, you don't just build results. You build pride, not arrogance, but a grounded confidence that cannot be taken. The fastest way to lose momentum is to rely on how you feel. Emotions are temporary. Habits are reliable. So when emotions dip, it's your habits that keep you moving forward. This is why daily disciplines matter more than motivation. They give you structure when everything around you feels chaotic. They hold you up when your energy dips. They remind you of who you are when your vision feels distant. What are you willing to do every day, even if it feels invisible, so that one day your results are undeniable? That's the question that separates those who want success from those who are becoming it. Because desire is common, discipline is rare, and those who master the daily are the ones who master their fate. You don't need more time. You need more focus. You don't need more hacks. You need more discipline. And that starts with what you do in the next hour, the next minute. Do you take control or give it away to distraction? Do you choose growth or choose comfort? In those tiny decisions, your future is written. And here's what's even more powerful. Once you realize that you can control your habits, you stop feeling powerless. You stop waiting. You stop blaming. You start building. You start owning your role in the outcome. And the moment you shift from reaction to responsibility, your life begins to change. No one is coming to push you. No one is coming to save you. It's on you. That's not a burden. It's a blessing. Because if it's on you, it's within your power. That means every time you choose discipline over distraction, you're proving to yourself that you're ready, not for perfection, but for progress. And that progress compounds into power. Every champion you admire, they started where you are, wrestling with the choice to stay where it's comfortable or step into discomfort. The difference is, they made the decision to keep going, even when they were overlooked, underestimated, or tied. They built unbreakable momentum, not because they were fearless, but because they were consistent, and that consistency became their weapon. If you want to shift your life, Shift your standard. If you want to build confidence, build consistency. It doesn't take genius. It takes grit. Showing up again and again until discipline isn't something you force. It's something you live. And in living it, you become someone you respect. That's the real goal. To look in the mirror and see someone who didn't quit when it got hard. Someone who built their strength in silence and let their results speak loud. Instead of why is this happening to me, you ask, what is this teaching me? You may. Instead of this is unfair, you say, this is developing my resilience. Instead of I can't handle this, you affirm, I have everything I need to overcome this. Opportunities often come disguised as challenges. The person who maintains empowering self-talk during difficult times is the person who recognizes these hidden opportunities. They see potential where others see problems. They find possibilities where others find obstacles. They create solutions where others create excuses. Your response to challenges determines your results. Your internal dialogue determines your response. Therefore, your self-talk during challenging times literally determines whether you'll succeed or fail. This is why it's crucial to train your mind to speak words of strength, courage, and possibility, especially when circumstances seem difficult. The same principle applies to opportunity. Most people miss opportunities because their internal dialogue is focused on what could go wrong instead of what could go right. They talk themselves out of taking action. They convince themselves they're not ready. They focus on the risks instead of the reward. But successful people train their minds to recognize and seize opportunities. When an opportunity appears, their internal dialogue immediately focuses on how to make it work, not on why it won't work. They ask themselves, how can I take advantage of this? Not what if this doesn't work out. This shift in internal dialogue is what separates those who achieve extraordinary results from those who remain trapped in mediocrity. It's not about being unrealistic or ignoring genuine risk. It's about training your mind to focus on possibilities and solutions, rather than problems and obstacles. The patterns of your life will continue until you interrupt them. The self-sabotage will continue until you eliminate it. The internal dialogue that has created your current results will continue to create similar results until you change it. But once you understand these patterns and apply the framework for changing them, you gain the power to create any result you desire. The question is, are you ready to take that level of responsibility for your internal conversation?